Hold up. Take a breather. Give me that towel.
The emotional unraveling between Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman reached its most volatile and profound climax on the April 14th, 2025 episode of Raw. What WWE crafted was one of the most intricately layered rivalries in its storied history. An emotional and psychological war that transcended traditional wrestling storytelling. Their relationship, which began nearly 4 years ago as a strategic alliance between a dominant champion and a master manipulator, has now devolved into a slow, simmering conflict. This isn't a rivalry driven by quick betrayals or shock twists. Rather, it's a subtle, painful corrosion of trust, an erosion of loyalty built on years of shared ambition and mutual respect. The beginning. A strategic partnership. From the outset, the pairing of Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman felt different from the typical manager-wrestler dynamics that WWE had presented before. Roman Reigns, a man with his own voice, sharp, calculated, and commanding, didn't need Paul Heyman's guidance on the mic. Yet by choosing Heyman as his special counsel, Roman revealed an ambition that extended far beyond the championship. Roman wasn't just aiming to dominate as a wrestler, he was building an empire. Heyman wasn't merely a manager. He was the tactician, the strategist who whispered in the ears of kings and emperors. Their bond was never purely transactional. It was deeply personal. Heyman believed in Roman not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Roman, in turn, trusted Heyman not just for his impeccable credentials, but because he knew Heyman had fully submitted to his vision. The dynamic was far more than a business partnership. It was the forging of a dynasty. And that is precisely why the dissolution of this bond is so profound. What began as a mutual understanding between two visionaries, one a king, the other a kingmaker, has now turned into an emotional battlefield, defined not by loud confrontations or grandiose betrayals, but by silence, hesitation, and an unspoken rupture. The cracks appear. A slow erosion. The unraveling began almost imperceptibly. There were no overt signs, no flashy moments of betrayal. Instead, the cracks in the foundation of their relationship began to show through subtle gestures, fleeting glances, and small, often unnoticed tensions. Roman, once the imposing tribal chief with unwavering control over his empire, started to glance nervously over his shoulder. It was these small, brilliant flourishes, the flickers of doubt in his eyes, the awkward pauses in his dialogue with Heyman, that slowly built an emotional tension. Heyman, ever the observer, could sense these shifts in Roman's demeanor, but rather than reacting with defiance or rebellion, he simply watched. He didn't intervene. He didn't speak. His silence spoke volumes. Unlike in other rivalries where the antagonist's betrayal is loud and theatrical, this one was underpinned by a quiet, insidious sense of impending collapse. The once unshakable Roman Reigns was starting to feel the weight of his own paranoia. His control was no longer absolute, and in the world of professional wrestling, where control is power, the loss of it is often the beginning of the end. A battle of loyalty and control. Heyman's loyalty to Roman was never a given. Like a chess master, Heyman understood that his allegiance had to be earned, not assumed. He had always followed winners, not out of devotion, but because they represented the future, the next big thing in wrestling. He stood beside Brock Lesnar during the Beast's reign of dominance, but as Lesnar's momentum faded, Heyman pivoted to Roman, who was on the rise. It wasn't simply a matter of loyalty. It was about vision, about seeing the potential for greatness and aligning himself with that. But what happens when the man Heyman backed begins to lose control, not just of his opponents, but of his very people? Solo Sikoa, Jimmy Uso, even Jey Uso. The cracks in the bloodline mirrored the growing emotional distance between Roman and Heyman. As Roman's grip on his empire began to loosen, Heyman didn't step in to mend the wounds. He watched them widen. This wasn't a betrayal of Roman by Heyman, but a betrayal of Roman's own image, his own belief in the invincibility of the tribal chief. The master stroke, restraint, and tension. What makes this storyline so masterful is the restraint WWE showed in how they built to this moment. They could have had Heyman turn on Roman in an explosive manner, perhaps with a chair shot or a dramatic alliance with a rival like Cody Rhodes or CM Punk. But WWE took the longer, more nuanced approach. They allowed the betrayal, or rather the gradual dissolution of trust, to unfold slowly. There was no dramatic shift in allegiance. Rather, it was an emotional tug-of-war, full of hesitation and second thoughts. The slow build added layers of complexity to the characters involved, making the eventual confrontation all the more impactful. The moment that truly encapsulated this tension came on Raw when Roman shoved Heyman after confronting him in the ring. It wasn't the physicality of the shove that mattered most. It was the look on Heyman's face. It wasn't anger, and it certainly wasn't fear. It was sorrow. The sorrow of a man who had seen the rise and fall of empires, the collapse of kings, and the decay of greatness. And now, Roman Reigns was staring into the abyss, and Paul Heyman was the last man standing between him and the inevitable fall. The tragedy of Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns has always been a complex character. He's never been a typical villain. He's a man who demanded loyalty in a world where loyalty is currency, yet he spent it recklessly. His ambition led him to build an empire, but in doing so, he made a critical mistake. He stopped seeing the value of those who helped him build it. Paul Heyman had always been there, advising, molding, and crafting the tribal chief persona, but Roman took it all for granted. In the end, Roman's emotional outburst wasn't just a reaction to Heyman's growing distance. It was the realization that he had lost control. For a man who prided himself on being a master of his narrative, the sudden shattering of his carefully constructed world was a devastating blow. His push against Heyman wasn't just about physical dominance. It was about the collapse of everything he had built. The tribal chief was supposed to be untouchable, but now he found himself alone in his empire. This moment, the shove, wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. It marked the severing of the last tether to Roman's past. Heyman had seen every version of Roman Reigns: silent powerhouse, reluctant babyface, and manipulative champion, and had always adapted. But now, even Heyman couldn't pretend that Roman still had control. The audience's role: evolution and legacy. The brilliance of this feud lies in the evolution of both men in the eyes of the audience. Roman Reigns, once reviled by fans for being pushed down their throats, has become a character of respect. His heel turn, subtle and methodical, has earned him admiration. Paul Heyman, too, has undergone a transformation. Once a slimy, opportunistic manager, Heyman became almost paternal in his demeanor, a wise figure standing beside Roman. Their aura, their presence together, was enough to captivate the audience. But now, that aura is gone. As Roman's power wanes, the audience is forced to confront the uncomfortable truth. Roman has lost the one person who legitimized his reign in the eyes of the fans. Heyman, in his silence, has declared his own independence. The quiet resignation in his eyes tells the story of a man who knows that Roman is no longer the champion he once was, and he has made the difficult choice to distance himself from a crumbling empire. The battle for control. Heyman's final move. The culmination of this emotional battle comes at WrestleMania, where the once unbreakable alliance between Roman and Heyman is finally laid bare. The triple threat world title match, Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins versus CM Punk, is more than just about championships. It's about power, identity, and the delicate balance of loyalty. But the true question is not who will win the match, but who Heyman will choose. It's not a simple choice between Roman and his challengers. It's a choice of self. Who is Paul Heyman without Roman? Who is Roman without Heyman? The brilliance of this narrative is in the depth of its psychological warfare. Heyman, ever the tactician, has always played the long game. And now, as Roman finds himself desperate to maintain his grip on his empire, Heyman stands at the crossroads, holding the final piece of the puzzle. Roman Reigns has lost control of his own narrative, and it is only a matter of time before he is forced to confront the reality of his isolation.